I want to go straight into a word about life, and it is in fact going to be different than what I planned. I was inspired by the Morrison family, and so I want to do something different. I do encourage you to read the word about life, the poem Now What by Thomas Schumann. It asks a lot of good questions, and Barb Zaborowski actually pointed out that in its questions, it actually is pointing toward some things that we can do in the future, what our next, perhaps our next Wedge Blade ministries are pointed to in this poem. So I encourage you to read it. The word about life, I'm using wisdom from two sources. One is Isaiah. Remember not the former things, nor consider the things of old. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. And the other is from Nancy Levine. And it is, honor the space between the no longer and the not yet. We are in a great deal of that kind of space. Does the time between Christmas and New Year's Day feel different to you? It does to me. I think that part of it is a holdover from years of my life being shaped by the academic calendar. You may share this feeling, especially as adult children come home from school and then return in the new year. I experienced the time between Christmas and New Year's very much as an in-between time. It is not a time of its own. It's a kind of time and space of no man's land. And again, I do not think I'm alone in this. I tried to have lunch on the 26th with someone who has been visiting our church, and 3 restaurants I like were closed. Our own church office is closed, at least officially. All the staff have been working on stuff, and I know Lois and Heidi have put time in at the office. Regardless, time is measured differently. Why would these restaurants not cooperate with my time schedule? And I ended up having to have someone visiting our church. In order to have a lunch conversation with them, we ended up driving probably about 12 miles trying to find a place open. Thus, the time between Christmas and New Year's is a liminal time. Liminal means in between, on the edge, a time and place not quite defined, because liminal time and space is between what was and what will be. It is a threshold time. It is a threshold space. We may not know if we're coming or going, but we are uncertain as to where we are. Cultural anthropologist Victor Turner called liminal time and space the time and space betwixt and between. It is the middle reality between the where we were and where we are going. And there are times when we can observe and point to liminal time and space. Graduating from high school. Being right there at that threshold between the end of one life and the beginning of another, and not sure about what is next, is liminal time and space. And religious rituals, they help us with this. Lucia, being with us this morning, is creating the betwixt and between reality. She is at the threshold of being outside our spiritual family and being inside our spiritual family. The public ritual of baptism names the crossing of that threshold. In the works of sociologists, psychologists, and anthropologists, they identify distinct pieces of a ritual. For them, a ritual marks the passage from one status to a new status. There is the pre-ritual and the post-ritual, and the liminal space in between where you are not what you were, nor are you what you will become. An anthropologist named Van Nepp observed the ritual of a person who was not a chief of their tribe, going through the ritual of becoming chief of the tribe. The person had to be preached at, scolded, insulted, slapped, made to serve food, clean, and bring firewood. The person had to be abused into submission and observed how he responded before they would enter into the ritual of pomp and coronation. The person had to own any way that he offended the community and die of his past self before he was reborn and allowed to be the new chief. There were very clear transitions, rituals, pathways, and states of being. This academic analysis of rituals may or may not flip your gizzard, and I suspect it doesn't. But I emphasize it for two reasons. One is it is not clear nor violent for us, that is the baptism ritual is not clear, nor is it violent for us. And two, where we start and where we end up is not so clear either. It used to be that if you were stuck in the pre-ritual state and liminal state of sin before you were baptized, then you went to hell. Now that was clarity. Not so nice, but you knew where you stood. Today we do not believe this. And yet the Morrison family bring their children and give us the joy and honor of baptizing them. It is important for me as a pastor and theologian to understand what this ritual means, and that it is more than just a warm, fuzzy, yet meaningless, archaic ritual. I hope we can move beyond what it was into a space of what baptism can be. By doing this, we create our own liminal space. Let me give you some more examples of how valuable the betwixt and between space is. Liminal space can be an experience of great anxiety or an experience of grace. Borders between nations are liminal spaces. While there is a line on a map is not reality. If you stand on the border and look in all directions, it does not look all that different. Again, we can choose how to relate to this liminal space. Do we relate to it with anxiety or with grace? Louis Urera is an author of several books about what it means to be human and live in liminal spaces. He said in an interview, "I think liminal space is where all writers go. That place of crossings, that place of pressure, of two things meeting. That's where the plankton wells up and the currents meet. And you can choose to see it in different ways. And either the border is a hideous, festering scar of oppression, horror, and violence, or it is a fraternal space where two cultures meet and can exchange. And honestly, particularly before the narco wars, there was and there still are bastions of friendship along the border. And all you have to do is go to places near Nogales or Yuma, where kids on the Mexican side and kids on the American side play volleyball over the wall with each other. We have this great group of singers connected with our congregation called the Threshold Choir. They could also be called the Liminal Space and Time Choir. They sing for people who are dying. There is no more liminal space and time than being on the threshold of life and death. The Threshold Choir models for us a way to be in relationship with liminal space as they choose to fill such time and space with music, love, and grace. Do we live in the liminal space of the border with anxiety or grace? Do we live in the liminal space of life with anxiety or grace? I encourage us to embrace the truth that all time and space is liminal. All of us as individuals and the groups we belong to are in transition. All of us must decide how we are going to live with the betwixt and between reality of the way life is. Will we live in it with grace? Or will we live in it with anxiety? Our baptism of Lucia is not a ritual that moves her from a state of sin to a state of grace. It is an acknowledgement that she is and always will be a threshold child of life and love, and she does not have to journey alone. Lucia's own ethnicity is a mix of Japanese, Armenian, Scotch, Irish, Italian. Did I leave anything out? She is a threshold child. The baptism ritual is essential for the life of our community. It is old and some would say archaic. I think it is outdated unless we add a layer of meaning that is relevant for contemporary human experience. This is what we did today. Lucia's baptism allows us to bear witness to the liminal state of reality. It allows us to renew ourselves to a spirituality of grace. It reminds us that the right evolutionary trajectory for our species is to love, to cross boundaries, to evolve into enjoying each other as human beings, celebrating our diversity, and anticipate the new thing God is doing in history and in our lives. Everything is everywhere. And the children are symbols of that and point the way. It is why we honor the space between no longer and not yet. And the children are the ones who will lead us into the future. So thank you, Morrison family, for sharing with us not only the reality that is now in our world, but the future that is full of hope. Amen.